guys, Dr. Will here, chiropractor from Miami Spine and Performance in Hollywood, Florida. Today you can see we have a change of scenery. We're here at Gracie Baja Aventura for part 2 of our Jiu-Jitsu injury prevention series. Last week we spoke about using hip external rotation, which we often use in things like triangles, body triangles, and guard retention. Today we're going to talk about hip internal rotation. And in my opinion, as somebody that's been training Jiu-Jitsu for a while and treated dozens of Jiu-Jitsu athletes at this point, hip internal rotation to me is one of the most important things for preventing injury, because I see a lot of medial meniscus injuries in Jiu-Jitsu. Almost every month or two, someone comes in with a medial meniscus injury, and the mechanism is usually because their foot gets caught in some kind of position and they end up putting some kind of medial torque on their knee, and then their hip does not allow them to rotate like it should, and so the pressure goes through the knee, right? If you don't have good mobility of the ankle and the hip, that's going to cause your knee to take excessive pressure. So for me, you know, as much as I love seeing patients, I do not like seeing Jiu-Jitsu patients come in with a torn meniscus. It breaks my heart every time, because I know a lot of times it's preventable, and usually it's a non-traumatic injury. It's usually something very innocuous, like a knee cut or like a half guard sweep, and then they tear the meniscus. So listen up, guys. We got 3 stretches for you that are going to help you prevent knee injuries and open up your hip for Jiu-Jitsu. So again, we're here with Jacob, Jiu-Jitsu training partner here. So I'm going to have Jacob in this half kneeling position, and I'm going to have him actually wind his back leg up a little bit into internal rotation, right? It's a little bit counterintuitive, because when the foot goes outside, that's actually the hip rotating to the inside. Jacob's then going to stand up straight, and he's just going to rock his hips back and forth, okay? So he's kind of focused on that left hip flexor, or the front of the left hip, just coming forwards and backwards. Okay. Jacob's just going to breathe here. Notice how he's staying nice and upright. He's not hunching over his leg. He's not twisting his torso. And if you're doing this right, you should feel sort of anterior hip and a little bit of groin. You shouldn't be feeling your lower back or anything like that. Go ahead and switch for me, Jacob. And this is another great warm-up exercise as well. You could do this before you start your traditional warm-up, or while you're on the mat. So I'll just wind up a little bit here, Jacob. And guys, some of you might notice when you start to work hip internal rotation, you may feel that you have almost no internal rotation, like your hip barely goes past neutral. That's okay, right? The most important thing is you're actually doing something proactive to address it. So don't force your hip into a position where you feel pressure on your back or on your knee. Just work with what you got. So now I'm going to have Jacob lie on his left side, and we're going to actually activate the muscles that perform internal rotation of the hip. Now again, this is not people generally neglect rotation exercises. Everyone's focused on, you know, strengthening muscle groups, quads and hamstrings and glutes, which is all good, but we also want to focus on strengthening specific motions, especially if you're an athlete. So Jacob's going to put this top leg on the mat, and what I'm going to have him do from here is start with your foot down for me, Jacob. Jacob's just going to slowly lift the foot up off the mat and bring it down. And lift up off the mat. So you guys can see here, Jacob's hip is positioned in a way that he's actually activating the internal rotators of the hip, right? And at first, when you first do this exercise, you might struggle to figure out even what muscles you are using, right? You can see here, Jacob's using a little bit of calf. It's a tricky exercise. It's not something people do every day. But once you can get really comfortable activating the internal rotators, they're going to really be protective at helping you prevent knee and hip injuries. Okay, let's do a couple more, Jacob. And notice how he's not rotating his torso, he's not rolling his hips, he's not arching his back, he's just performing the movement as prescribed. So the last motion we're going to do as part of this hip internal rotation series is going to be our side-lying hip cars. And if you're a patient of mine, or you've been following my content for a while, you know that I love hip cars, and to me they're kind of the most all-encompassing hip exercise. So we've just warmed up the hip internal rotators, we've just activated them, and now it's time to put them into like a functional sequence. So whichever side you'd like, Jacob, go ahead and lie on your side, and we'll go through these side-lying hip cars. So I'm gonna walk Jacob through it to start, and then I'm gonna have him do a rep on his own. So from the side-lying position, we'll just start kind of in neutral like this. I'm gonna have him bring his knee up to the level of his hip. Then he's going to bring his knee up this way and open. Notice how we're really controlling that he's not rolling the torso or the low back. He's then going to internally rotate and extend his leg this way, nice and slow. This exercise is all about quality, not about quantity. This is not a 3 sets of 10 type of exercise. Okay? And then now he's going to follow that path backwards all the way up and through. Good. So now I'll have Jacob do that on his own. Good. So we're going to go into hip flexion, and then we're going to go into abduction. He's going to rotate. Other way, Jacob. He's going into internal rotation. Now he's going to bring that hip into extension. Perfect. And he'll tell you he's feeling all the muscles of his hip working right now. Again, this is one of these kind of deceptively tricky exercises. I'm going to bring the knee up, rotate the knee down and forward, and back to neutral. Perfect. All right, guys, so those are the 3 exercises that I recommend that you use for hip internal rotation to warm up and to train your hip for jiu-jitsu and preventing knee injuries. If you'd like a more in-depth breakdown of the hip cars, I have a number of different hip car videos on my channel, including face down, side lying, and standing. I would use a variety of those exercises. In my opinion, the side lying one is most applicable for jiu-jitsu because obviously we're working off the ground. But just to review, we have the half kneeling hip flexor stretch with internal rotation bias. We have the side lying hip rotation like so, where we're activating the rotators, and then we go into a functional movement, which is the hip car. So again, guys, if you're somebody that, if you want to prevent knee injuries, if you have a history of specifically medial knee injuries, you got to get your internal rotation right. So thank you for watching, guys. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.